I'm starting out in Photoshop and I have opened up my grid that you are going to be working with to get a good feel for how to use the tablet and some of the different settings that you'll be working with. The very top of the screen is where all of the settings for using your paintbrush are found, which you're a little bit familiar with from the Multiplicity project. But I'm going to start out with my brush palette, which is at the very top right here. I'm going to click on that, and it brings up a couple of different settings of paintbrushes that you can choose from. For this, starting out, I'm just going to choose a regular paintbrush, so one that is just rounded here, but you can see how there's a couple of different types of brushes you can choose from in the future. The size of your brush is also found here, so if you move your mouse off to the screen, you can see the size of the circle that it's going to create. So I'm going to make mine a little bit smaller, maybe around 9 or 10. And then I'm going to leave my hardness set all the way to 100% for now, and I'm going to close out of this. Up at the top where it says opacity, I'm going to leave that set to 100. The flow, I'm going to leave set to 100 as well for now. And if you click over here where it says always use pressure for size when off, brush preset controls pressure, I'm going to select that so that that is marked here. And this allows me to, as I'm working with the tablet, create either a darker line if I press all the way, or a really light line if I'm barely pressing it all on my screen. So you can see how you can vary your brush size by the pressure that you put on your tablet. Okay, so now we're ready to start actually drawing and practicing with the tablet here a little bit. I'm going to add a new layer so that I'm not drawing on my original image. Using the tablet and creating these drawings are really important to always be adding that new layer. So I'm going to click on the new layer, which is by the trash can at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see in my layers panel it adds a new layer. And then I'm ready to start just practicing my hand-eye coordination with this tablet. So to do that, I'm just going to start connecting some of these dots. And you'll notice that even for me, it's a little bit tricky here at first to just get a really good feel for using the tablet. So make sure that you're taking your time and actually trying to connect each of these circles. It will pay off in the long run as we get started working more with the tablet on your project and creating more detailed drawings. So keep trying to connect these dots as you're going around the entire grid here. As you continue to fill in the rest of these dots, I would experiment a little bit with the settings at the very top and maybe some of your different paintbrushes and paintbrush sizes. So you can adjust the flow and maybe take that down a little bit, and as you're working with the flow, that's going to allow your lines to be a little bit lighter, and you can kind of go back over them a couple of times to see those more visibly. You can also play around with taking down the opacity and just choosing some different brushes to be working with and kind of pick out the difference there and what you like as you're going through and connecting the rest of these dots. So you do need to have all of these connected before submitting this, but go ahead and continue just connecting the dots and playing around with some of the different brush settings. And then we will move on to our next image as soon as you finish connecting these dots. Now that I have my next image loaded into Photoshop, I'm going to start practicing filling in some of these different shapes and tracing around the edges here. In order to get a really precise tracing around an object, I'm going to zoom in on my picture. So I'm going to hold down Command and hit plus on my keyboard, and maybe I'll start out with just one of these stars over here. And right away you'll notice that my paintbrush size looks way too big to be tracing around the outside of these stars. So I'm going to go up to my brush settings and adjust the size, maybe pick a different brush as well. And then from here I'm going to choose a color I want to work with. So maybe I'll go with red for now, and start tracing around the outside of the star and just starting to fill it in after I trace around the outside here. And you'll continue going around and tracing and filling in all of the objects and shapes here, just like a coloring book, but really just to get a feel for using the tablets here so that you're used to using all of the different settings. If you need to undo something, again, make sure that you're clicking that bottom part of your pen tool, and that's going to take you back to whatever you had before, so you can use that setting that you adjusted for the tablets and settings to undo, go to your menu, and just some of those other things that were discussed in the tutorial. So go ahead and finish tracing around and coloring everything in this picture, so it should look just like a coloring book when you're done. You can come up with some creative colors, play around with the different brush settings. If you want to change the color, again, you double click where this red box is, just double click there and you can choose whichever color you want to be working with. Now the one thing that I didn't do as I started coloring on this picture is that I did not add a new layer. So right away I do want to start with that new layer. So I'm going to undo all of this, and that's exactly what you would have to do if you forget to add a layer, is go back and undo everything because you do need that new layer, so at the end when you finish coloring everything in, you're left with just your picture and not the background image. So for example, if I hide this background layer here that the picture's on, I'm going to see just my drawing, and that's what you want when you're finished. So as soon as you finish filling everything in like the coloring book, go ahead and save it as a JPEG. So go to File, Save As, save both images as JPEGs, and then turn those into Classroom for a grade.